The concrete was still warm from the shells that had pounded it for 3 days straight. First Lieutenant Marcus Webb pressed his palm against the bunker wall and felt something that troubled him more than the German bodies scattered in the mud outside. The surface was smooth. Perfectly smooth. Not a crack. Not a chip. 3 days of American artillery, and the wall looked like it had been poured yesterday. Webb was a structural engineer from Pittsburgh. Before the war, he designed bridges. He understood concrete the way a surgeon understood flesh. And what he touched now was better than anything he had ever built. It was November 1944. The Allied push through the Siegfried Line had stalled near the Belgian-German border, and the brass wanted answers. They wanted to know why their shells bounced off German bunkers like rain off a tin roof. They wanted to know what waited deeper inside the Reich. So they sent Webb and his team to find out. The rain came down in gray sheets. Webb stood at the bunker entrance with 3 men behind him. Sergeant Thomas Halloran carried enough explosives in his pack to bring down a cathedral. Corporal David Rosen held a notebook and spoke German better than most Germans. Private Franklin Hayes was 19 years old and had not stopped shaking since they passed the first row of bodies. A dead German lay face down near the door. His helmet had rolled away, and his hair was blonde and matted with mud. One hand reached toward the bunker entrance as if he had been crawling home when the bullet found him. Nobody had moved him yet. Nobody would for a while. Halloran spat tobacco juice into the mud. So we just walk in there. Could be 50 Krauts waiting inside. Could be, Webb said. Orders say we go anyway. Orders. Halloran laughed, but there was no humor in it. My brother followed orders at Anzio. Got himself killed following orders. Rosen looked up from his notebook. The signs say this is a command bunker. Communications center. The Germans would have pulled back anyone valuable before they retreated. Would have, Hayes said quietly. That means maybe they did not. Webb studied the entrance. The Germans had built it at an angle, forcing anyone who entered to turn a corner before reaching the main corridor. A perfect kill zone. Anyone defending from inside could cut down attackers without exposing themselves. Simple. Brutal. Effective. The Siegfried Line stretched 400 miles from the Netherlands to Switzerland. The Germans had started building it in 1936, and by now it contained over 18,000 bunkers, tunnels, and gun emplacements. The fortifications were designed to make invasion impossible. They were designed to bleed any attacking army white, and yet here Webb stood, on the German side of the line. It had not been impossible. It had just been expensive. He clicked on his flashlight and stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Outside, the world smelled of mud and death and burning vehicles. Inside, the air was cool and still and carried the faint chemical scent of fresh concrete. The walls pressed close. The ceiling hung low. Everything was designed to make attackers feel trapped, claustrophobic, vulnerable. Webb ran his flashlight along the ceiling. Steel reinforcement beams. Ventilation ducts. Electrical conduits. The Germans had thought of everything. They had built this bunker to survive direct hits from the largest Allied bombs. They had built it to last 1,000 years. The corridor opened into a larger chamber. Ammunition racks lined the walls, most of them empty now. Shell casings littered the floor. Someone had fought here. Someone had died here. Dark stains spread across the concrete in patterns that Webb did not want to examine too closely. Rosen translated the signs on the walls. Storage. Medical. Communications. Command. The bunker was not just a fighting position. It was a small city buried underground. Hayes whispered, how did they build all this? The resources. The labor. It must have taken years. It did, Webb said. While we were still pretending the war would not happen, they were pouring concrete. A sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the bunker. Metal scraping against stone. Everyone froze. Halloran's hand moved to his sidearm. They waited. The sound did not repeat. Webb thought about the bridge he had designed in Pennsylvania. The one that collapsed during construction. 3 workers had died because he had missed a flaw in the support calculations. He had built something meant to connect people, and it had killed them instead. The Germans had built something meant to kill people. And it was perfect that he moved deeper into the darkness. His team followed. Somewhere below, the sound of scraping metal came again. Someone was still alive down there. The chamber was 3 stories tall and should not have existed. Webb stood at the entrance and felt his understanding of warfare shift beneath him like sand. This was not a bunker. This was a cathedral built for killing. Massive concrete pillars rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Ventilation shafts hummed with electricity from generators hidden somewhere deeper in the complex. Steel blast doors lined the walls, each one thick enough to stop a tank shell, each one positioned to funnel attackers into overlapping fields of fire. The Germans had turned geometry itself into a weapon. Halloran let out a low whistle. Mother of God. Rosen moved along the walls, reading German labels by flashlight. His voice echoed in the vast space. Supply depot. Ammunition storage. Water purification. Medical bay. He paused at a larger door. This one says command operations. They ran the whole sector from down here. Hayes stood motionless near the entrance. His flashlight beam trembled in his hand. They could have held out for months, he said. Maybe longer. Why did they leave? They did not leave, Webb said quietly. We pushed them out. Cost us 4,000 casualties to take this sector. 4,000 men to capture one bunker complex. The Siegfried Line had been Adolf Hitler's answer to the Maginot Line that France had built after the First World War. But where the French had created a single defensive barrier, the Germans had built something far more sophisticated. The West Wall, as they called it, consisted of multiple defensive belts stretching 15 miles deep in some areas. Each belt contained hundreds of interconnected bunkers, tank traps, and gun positions. Breaking through one line only meant facing another. Allied intelligence had underestimated the fortifications badly. When American forces reached the Siegfried Line in September 1944, they expected to punch through in days. Instead, the fighting dragged on for months. Some bunkers survived hundreds of artillery rounds without significant damage. Some required direct assault by infantry who died by the dozen trying to reach the firing slits. Webb moved toward a door marked with German script that Rosen translated as planning section. Inside, they found something that made Webb's blood turn cold. Maps covered every wall. Not just maps of existing fortifications, but plans for structures that had never been built. Underground factories designed to survive any bombing campaign. Railway tunnels connecting bunker complexes across hundreds of miles. Defensive networks that would have turned all of Germany into one massive fortress. Rosen studied the documents spread across a central table. His face had gone pale. These are expansion plans. They wanted to extend the line all the way to Berlin. Multiple layers. Redundant communications. Self-sufficient supply chains. He looked up at Webb. If they had finished this, we would still be fighting in France. Halloran grabbed a handful of papers. We should burn all of it. Every last page. Make sure they can never use these ideas again. Intelligence needs these documents, Rosen said sharply. This is exactly what the brass sent us to find. Intelligence. Halloran's voice dripped with contempt. Intelligence got my brother killed. Intelligence said the Germans were finished 6 months ago. Webb said nothing. He was staring at the engineering drawings. The precision. The elegance. Part of him, the part that had spent years learning how to build things that would stand against time and weather and gravity, recognized genius in these plans. German engineers had solved problems that American engineers were still struggling with. He hated himself for noticing. He hated himself for admiring the work of men who built structures designed to kill his countrymen. A smaller room branched off from the planning section. Hayes found it first. His voice came out strange and hollow. Lieutenant. You should see this. The room contained personal effects. Letters bundled with string. Photographs in cheap frames. A child's drawing showing a house with flowers and a smiling yellow sun. Someone had pinned it to the wall with a bent nail. Hayes held a letter in shaking hands. Can you read this? He asked Rosen. Rosen took the letter. His eyes moved across the German script. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. It is from a wife to her husband. She writes about their daughter learning to walk. She asks when the war will end. She asks when he will come home. Hayes set the letter down carefully, as if it might break. They are just people, he whispered. Just regular people. They were, Halloran said. His voice was hard as the concrete walls. Now they are the enemy. Do not forget that. From somewhere far below, the scraping sound came again. Closer now. More urgent. Webb drew his pistol. We are not alone down here. The team moved toward the sound, toward whatever waited in the darkness below. Behind them, the child's drawing watched from the wall. A house. Flowers. A smiling sun. A world that existed only in memory now. The boy could not have been older than 16. He sat against the far wall of the storage room with his hands raised and tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. 3 other Germans lay nearby. 2 were wounded. 1 was dying. The emergency lights cast everything in shades of red, like the whole room was bleeding. Webb kept his pistol raised. Halloran covered the left flank. Rosen moved forward slowly, speaking German in a calm, steady voice. Hayes stood frozen near the doorway, his rifle pointed at nothing. The boy spoke rapidly, desperately. His words tumbled over each other in a flood of fear. He says they surrendered 4 days ago, Rosen translated. Their officer left them behind. Said reinforcements were coming. No one came. They have been waiting in the dark. They ran out of food yesterday. The wounded Germans did not move. One had a bandage wrapped around his chest that had turned brown with dried blood. The other held his arm at an angle that made Webb's stomach turn. The dying one lay flat on his back, breathing in shallow gasps. His eyes stared at the concrete ceiling without seeing it. Halloran spat on the floor. Leave them. We have what we came for. Let their own people deal with them. There are no more of their people coming, Rosen said quietly. The line has collapsed. These boys will die down here if we leave them. Good. Halloran's voice held no anger. Just exhaustion. Just the cold mathematics of survival. Fewer Germans means fewer bullets aimed at our boys. That is how war works. Hayes finally spoke. His voice cracked like thin ice. We cannot just let them die. Look at them. They are children. Children who would have killed you yesterday, Halloran shot back. Children who probably did kill Americans last week. You want to carry them out? Fine. You explain to the next family who gets a telegram that their son died because we were too busy helping the enemy. The argument hung in the stale air. Webb watched the German boy's face. The fear. The desperate hope. The absolute certainty that his life depended on what these Americans decided in the next few seconds. The Volkssturm had been conscripting boys as young as 14 by late 1944. Old men and children, armed with whatever weapons could be found, thrown into the line to slow the Allied advance. Hitler had decreed that every German citizen would fight to the death. Surrender was treason. Retreat was treason. Living when you could die for the fatherland was treason. These boys had not chosen to be soldiers. They had been chosen. And now they sat in the darkness waiting to find out if the Americans were as brutal as their propaganda had promised. Webb lowered his pistol. We take them. Halloran turned sharply. Lieutenant, we take them, Webb repeated. All of them. We are engineers, Sergeant. We build things. We do not leave people to die in holes. This is not a construction project. This is war. I know what war is. Webb met Halloran's eyes. I have seen enough death in the last 6 months to know exactly what war is. That is why we are taking them. Because if we leave 4 boys to die in the dark, then what exactly are we fighting for? The silence stretched. Finally, Halloran looked away. Your call, Lieutenant. Your responsibility when this goes wrong. Rosen knelt beside the dying German. The young man's breathing had turned ragged. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. Internal injuries. Nothing anyone could do now except wait. The dying soldier's hand shot out and grabbed Webb's wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. His eyes focused with sudden clarity. Americaner, he whispered. His English was broken but clear. The East Corridor. Do not use the East Corridor. Why? Webb asked. What is in the East Corridor? The German tried to speak again. His mouth moved. No sound came out. His grip loosened. His eyes went still. Rosen closed the dead man's eyes gently. He was trying to warn us. Hayes checked the map they had found in the planning section. His face went white. Lieutenant. The East Corridor is the only way back to the surface from this level. Webb looked at the remaining Germans. The boy. The 2 wounded men. They knew something. The fear in their eyes had changed. It was not just fear of the Americans anymore. It was fear of something else entirely. What did your people do to the East Corridor? Webb asked. Rosen translated. The boy's answer made everyone's blood run cold. Demolition charges, Rosen said slowly. The whole corridor is rigged. If anyone tries to leave, it brings down the entire bunker. They were not planning to retreat. They were planning to bury everything. Above them, hundreds of tons of concrete and steel waited to become their tomb. The wires were beautiful. That was the terrible thing. Webb crouched in the East Corridor with his flashlight illuminating a web of demolition charges so elegantly designed that part of him wanted to study it instead of disarm it. Thin copper lines ran along the ceiling in perfect parallel rows. Pressure plates lay beneath the floor tiles in a pattern calculated to catch anyone who tried to walk through. The Germans had turned this corridor into a mathematical equation with only one solution: death. Halloran examined the explosive charges embedded in the walls. His face had gone gray. This is not standard demolition. They use Springbuch's 24 charges. Military grade. Enough to collapse a building twice this size. He traced the wiring with his finger, careful not to touch anything. Redundant triggers. Motion sensors. Pressure plates. Even a timer. He looked at Webb. Whoever designed this did not want anyone walking out of here. Can you disarm it? Webb asked. Maybe. If I had 3 days and a team of specialists. Halloran shook his head. We have maybe 3 hours before our people send a search party. The moment someone else enters this bunker, they will trigger the corridor charges trying to reach us. The German prisoners waited behind them. The boy, whose name was Karl, watched the Americans with eyes that held a strange mixture of fear and hope. The 2 wounded soldiers leaned against each other for support. They understood enough English to know what was happening. Rosen had been studying the wiring diagrams they found in the planning section. The system has a central junction point. Here. He pointed to a spot where multiple wire clusters converged behind a steel access panel. If we can reach that junction without triggering any of the floor sensors, we might be able to cut the main power feed. That is 30 feet away, Hayes said. Through a corridor full of pressure plates. The plates are spaced for normal walking patterns, Webb said slowly. His engineer's mind was already mapping the problem. But the ceiling conduits run the full length. If someone could move along the conduits without touching the floor, everyone looked at him. I weigh the least, Webb said. And I understand the wiring better than anyone else. You are also our commanding officer, Halloran said. If you die, who leads this team out? If I do not try, no one leads anyone anywhere. The plan was simple and insane. Hayes and Halloran would lift Webb to the ceiling conduits near the corridor entrance. He would move hand over hand along the metal framework, suspended above the pressure plates, until he reached the junction box. Then he would cut the power feed and pray he had chosen the right wire. Carl stepped forward suddenly. He spoke rapidly to Rosen. He says there is a secondary trigger, Rosen translated. A backup system. The original engineers added it after the main installation. It is not on the diagrams. He knows where it is because he helped install it. Halloran's hand moved toward his pistol. How convenient. The prisoner suddenly has information that will save us all. He wants to live, Rosen said quietly. Same as us. Webb looked at Carl. The boy's face was earnest, desperate, terrified. He could be lying. He could be leading them into a trap. Or he could be exactly what he appeared to be, a frightened child trying to survive. Show me, Webb said. Carl pointed to a section of wall near the access panel. A small metal box, painted to match the concrete, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. Webb began his crawl. The ceiling conduits groaned under his weight. Below him, the pressure plates waited like patient predators. Sweat dripped from his forehead and fell toward the floor. He watched each drop hit the concrete between the plates. Safe. For now, his arms burned. His fingers cramped. 20 feet. 15. 10. He reached the junction box and forced his hands to stop trembling. The wires inside were color-coded, but the colors meant nothing without the key. Red could mean power. Red could mean detonation. There was no way to know, but Carl had pointed to the secondary trigger. The small metal box on the wall. Webb could see it now, just within reach. A simple mechanical switch connected to the main system by a single black wire. He pulled out his knife. The blade caught the dim light. Behind him, 7 men held their breath. American and German. Enemies who had been trying to kill each other a week ago. Now their lives hung on the same thin wire. Webb cut, the lights flickered once and went dark. Emergency power died with a fading hum. In the sudden silence, no explosion came. No collapse. No death, just breathing. Just heartbeats. Just life continuing for a few more precious hours. They emerged from the bunker as dawn painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. American soldiers rushed forward to help with the wounded. The German prisoners were taken away for interrogation. Carl looked back once at Webb before he disappeared into a waiting truck. A colonel arrived within the hour, demanding a report. He wanted to know what they had found. What the German fortifications revealed about enemy capabilities. Webb stood in the morning light and thought about everything he had seen. The perfect concrete. The elegant engineering. The child's drawing pinned to a wall. The wires designed to bury everyone alive. The boy who had helped save them all. They built it to last forever, Webb finally said. Every bunker. Every tunnel. Every wall. They thought they could stop us with concrete and steel. And, the colonel pressed. Webb watched the sun rise over the broken battlefield. Somewhere behind the lines, Carl was being processed as a prisoner of war. Somewhere ahead, more bunkers waited. More walls. More wire. They were wrong, Webb said. They built walls. We built something else. What? Webb did not answer. But he thought about bridges. About connections. About the moment when enemies became survivors, became something almost like allies, working together to escape a tomb. Some things were not meant to last 1,000 years. Some things were meant to bring people together, however briefly. Before the war pulled them apart again, the bunker stood silent behind them. Perfect. Useless. Already forgotten.